Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank both of our friends that are here. These are two of our most distinguished and, frankly, most learned members of Congress, particularly on this issue. And let me establish a caveat up front. I don't sit on the committees of jurisdiction for authorization, I thank myself some days. And I don't sit on the committee of jurisdiction in terms of appropriation. I don't sit on the subcommittee for Homeland Security. So I try to follow this really by listening to people like you and talking to the members that really are doing the hearings and doing the hard work. I'm going to lay out a couple of conditions. You guys can agree or disagree. First is, and I think this is important for the American people to realize, that this country is extraordinarily generous in terms of letting people in. We let over 1 million people in legally, roughly 1 million, every single year. I don't think there's any other country in the world that comes close to that. And we do it from all over the world. So, you know, caveat number one, we're pretty generous. And if you want to get here you can pass the appropriate clearances or whatever, you have a better chance than most. The problem is, I guess, we're a very popular final destination for the reasons that we all know. We all love our country. We all appreciate the freedom we enjoy. We all appreciate the prosperity we enjoy. We understand what a unique and diverse land this is, and we're all privileged to be in. So, but number one, whatever the arguments are here, calling any American or xenophobic or anti-immigrant, I mean, our whole history just laughs at that, and our current status suggests that's not true. And the fact that even with an expansion of, or even with those numbers coming in, the country increases by about 3 million people a year. And again, 1 million of them are legal immigrants, and we all welcome them. We're glad they're here. But we legalized every illegal alien that we had in 1986, and we had about 3 million, we thought then, and now we have about 11 or 12 or whatever the number is. But it's a very substantial increase despite this explosion of legal and appropriate immigration. So I will disagree that chaos started with Donald Trump. We've clearly had chaos at the border for decades. That's why people are getting in illegally or coming in legally and then overstaying visas, because we haven't got any internal enforcement that works either. And I have to say, I've been here long enough to watch both parties struggle with this. When President Bush was here, we struggled with this as Republicans and Democrats, and we weren't able to get to a solution. You know, we tried, but collapsed in the Senate. I doubt what they were dealing with in the Senate could have gotten through here. With all due respect to my friends on the other side, I watched them for 4 years with 2 presidents of different parties that would have signed anything they could pass. Anything. I don't think a single bill that was comprehensive was ever introduced or really passed, you know, could get to the desk. And certainly, particularly in the first 2 years of the Obama administration, I mean, the numerical control that Democrats had was extraordinary. I mean, you couldn't filibuster in the Senate, you know, for much of that time, had overwhelming majorities here, and had a president that had run with the commitment to put a bill on the floor within his first 100 days. He never did it, and our friends never wrote one. So now here we are again, with the same set of problems we've had for a long time. And I want to begin by congratulating you, Mr. Chairman, because you're actually trying to legislate. Yeah, you've actually got a bill that you've talked to a lot of people about, that you've worked on. You've got another bill that you're part of that process as well. You are trying to produce law. You are trying to deal with this problem. And it's a problem this big that's been so difficult that neither party has been able to devise a solution. I don't expect your bill to be perfect the first time I see it. As a matter of fact, that's sort of the legislative process. I expect us to get, I hope, something through the House and have a negotiating position, and the Senate will have to do something, take up our bill or produce their own, and the President is going to have to be involved in this. And frankly, calling for solutions, and some of my friends on the other side have, where we know politically it'll pass with 180 Democrats and 50 Republicans, no way the President of the United States is ever going to sign that bill. That's a recipe for political chaos. That's not a solution. You're actually trying to do law. And again, it seems to me, in both your bills, you've been pretty generous. And I would actually say the President's been pretty generous here, too. When I see a president lay out his 4 pillars, and one of them is, and I've yet to hear a single Democrat get up and compliment him on this. You can disagree with parts of the bill, but I was pretty surprised when his initial proposal was the whole DACA population, not just DACA enrollees. I was pretty surprised when he talked about a path to citizenship. I thought those were extraordinary concessions. I've yet to hear one Democrat thank him. Now, the things he asked in exchange, you may disagree with. But security on the border, I don't see why anybody should disagree with that, particularly when we're letting 1 million people in legally. We're not trying to exclude people. We're just trying to make sure that it's a legal process that they come through. And frankly, I thought the proposals on chain migration and getting rid of the visa lottery and transforming it into something else, those are very reasonable things, too. And I think you do a lot of that in your legislation, both pieces that you're approached with. So, and I'm going to give you both time to respond because I've orated here, and I don't have a lot of questions because I've been to enough meetings. You've been pretty clear, and I've watched you listen to suggestions or concerns and make adjustments in your legislation accordingly. That's what a good legislator does, and I suspect that's what you'll continue to do through the process. We'll have an amendment process, and the Senate will do something again, but we've got to get started on this sooner or later. And again, with all due respect to my friends, if they've got a solution, I'm happy to look at it, but it's got to be able to pass. And it's, I've seen dreamer bills, clean bills, fine, but that doesn't sell very well in my part of the world. People want to help those kids, but they want to make sure that if we're going to help kids that are in the DACA program, we don't have another generation of them, that we secure the border at the same time or before. I think actually, if people were certain that their borders were secure and they weren't going to be taken advantage of, they would be incredibly generous, because that's just the nature of the American people, and they all have their own personal stories that quite often involve this. So, I hope that, I know there's lots of discussion still going on about this or that, but I think it's really important we put something on the floor. I'm glad with the 2 choices that we have. You're associated with both of them. And start this process. And I would urge some of my friends on the other side to take a look at some of the concessions that the president has made or some of these bills. And look, I've done this before. I can vote for this now, but if these things aren't corrected, I can't vote for it in the end, but I'm going to help in the process. I'm going to offer amendments. I'll be part of that discussion. I'm going to move it through. And I don't, again, I hope we see some of that on the other side. I don't see a lot of it. Again, it's hard. Again, I'm not being critical. I watched my own side struggle with this and collapse back in 05 and 06. So it's not easy, but at least you're trying. At least you got a real piece of legislation. You've got it up here in front of the Rules Committee. We do our job. Hopefully, both those pieces of legislation will get the floor, and let's just keep working it and see where we go. But again, in the process, let's not paint anybody in America is anti-immigrant when we let 1 million people in a year legally, and anybody is sort of being xenophobic. And I'm not suggesting at all that my friend from California, because she didn't and doesn't act that way, but I've heard it, that we don't care about people, really. I mean, I actually do care about people. I worry about people on a 2,000-mile journey. I will tell you, and the idea this is new, I had 1,200 minors in my district and when President Obama was president. 1,200 at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I went down there to see them, and they were from about 6 to about 16 years old. They'd clearly been separated from some adults, because I don't think a 6-year-old by himself or herself comes all that way. Maybe a 16-year-old, but not people that are 8, 9, and 10. So they'd been separated. They were kept in very good conditions, I might say, the best that could be done, and they got better. And people, honestly, they probably were safer, better fed, had better medical care, and were getting education better in that period of time they were there than in the entire time it had taken the journey from where they were. They were much greater risk in that journey than they were when they were finally in the hands of the United States. So, again, to suggest our border security people aren't doing this job, almost impossible job, as well as we can, and we're not doing the resources. I worked with Sylvia Burwell when she was, again, not part of the enforcement part of this, but HHS handles those kids once they're there. And I've watched 2 different administrations and 2 very fine secretaries, and Secretary Burwell and Secretary Azar, struggle over what to do, try to predict. They have no idea what the surge is going to be in a certain summer. We have no idea. How do we predict this? How do we deal with it? And at least you're trying to give us a more rational system. And hope, and frankly, getting rid of this idea that we treat Mexicans one way and everybody else from any place else another way, it strikes me as the right thing to do. We ought to have the ability to return people as quickly. If you want to come to this country appropriately and you've got a situation where you need asylum, you can go to any American embassy in the world, any country in the world, and make your case and get it adjudicated right there. You can do it at the port of entry, although they're pretty overwhelmed right now, and I understand their problem. But you don't have a right to come across the border and then complicate the legal system just on that basis. So, again, I commend you for trying to do something. I look forward to working with you and learning more about it, honestly, as we go forward. I'm not interested in passing something the president won't sign. I don't think that does any good, or that the Senate won't take up. I don't think that does any good. And I know you're in conversation with both the President of the United States and with our colleagues on the other side of the rotunda, who I must suggest probably hope we don't make it. It's sort of like I'm not sure they particularly want to pick up this problem because it's thorny. But if we do, then I think they will. I think they'll give it a try, and that's the important thing. We just have to keep at this because what we've got isn't working. Being critical of anything new, to me, until you give me the alternative that you can pass and get a president to sign, is kind of pointless. You try to make the thing better. If you can't agree with it in the end, vote no. Fair enough. Everybody's got the same vote. But I'm not, to quote our former president, Mr. Roosevelt, I'm not about to throw stones at the guy in the arena. You're in the arena, Mr. Chairman, and there's a lot of critics in the stands. But I appreciate the effort that you've made to try and get this body to do something that's hard and to try and work in good faith with all the different factions. I think it's been an amazing effort, and just reminds me again why I'm going to miss you so much when you leave this chamber. You're a good legislator, a good man. You're trying to do the right thing. I think all of us owe you our best efforts to help you get there. I didn't mean to uncork, Chairman. I'm sorry, but if either of our two distinguished people want to respond to any of that, that's fine. That's just kind of the way I look at the world right now.
Thank you. I have only one request.